Hi, I'm Jesper from Tungsten Automation, your friendly neighborhood solutions engineer, and welcome to this first video on Decisioning AI. It's the first video in a series of 3, and those 3 videos will, guide you into, on the one hand, utilizing the Decisioning AI Azure Connector for Tungsten TotalAgility, of course. But I also want to use these 3 videos to give you a better understanding of what Decisioning AI means, what it means in a tungsten automation context. And I also want to use this as a springboard for future videos on this specific topic. Because of course, the world is changing so quickly. The things I'm going to tell you today will be old news before you know it, especially when it comes to AI. So, without further ado, this first video I'm going to be using to discuss some core concepts, make sure that we're all on the same page. I also want to do a quick recap on tungsten automation, of course, and make sure that we all understand how Decisioning AI fits within, our portfolio and where we see the actual added value. I'm going to talk about the high-level architecture. I'm going to also introduce, so how do we then see all these systems working together, and make sure that we then have a solid footing before we actually go into video number 2. In that video, I'm going to be using, Azure Machine Learning, and I will guide you along the way to set up your very first Decisioning AI model. Of course, Decisioning AI is a rather broad subject, so I've decided to do an example based on classification. There are, of course, other applications of Decisioning AI. You can consider things like anomaly detection, but also forecasting. And of course, there's a lot to do there. And I'll also want to touch a bit about why I selected that use case, but that's going to come further on in this same video, in this one, not the second one. I'm going to talk about that in this video. And then the third video is actually where we bring everything together, where we're going to be connecting Tungsten TotalAgility to that decisioning model in Azure. I'm going to do that based on the connector that you can find on the Tungsten Automation Marketplace. But I'll also show you how you can build it yourself. I do that on the one hand because, of course, the world is evolving, and it might be that you want to use another platform instead of Azure, and you can then use those same steps to build your own connector for your platform of choice, whether it's on-prem or cloud, whether it's your own model or maybe a commercial model. That doesn't really matter. But I want to make sure that we all understand and see how easy it actually is. So, that without further ado, let's dive right in. So, as mentioned, I wanted to quickly touch upon, tungsten automation. How do we go to market? How do we actually see where organizations can benefit from our technology? We position ourselves as a trusted intelligent automation partner, provider, vendor, however you want to call it. If you then look at the 3 main silos, how we then actually execute that, you'll see that it's going to be workflow automation, invoice automation, and last and certainly not least, document automation and security. And if you then look a bit further down south, you'll see that foundation on which all of this is based and which all of this leverages. And that's the AI-powered IDP platform combined with the Tungsten Automation Marketplace, where you probably found the connector we're talking about today. So what then is that AI that powers that IDP platform? That's a perfect segue to my next slide, where we're actually going to discuss that. So Tungsten Automation has a very rich history and pedigree, even if I may say so, when it comes to document and content AI. That's a field where we've been a pioneer, a disruptor for decades. And we've really almost defined that specific, well, flavor of AI, you might say. And that's, of course, something where you might consider, okay, well, on the one hand, that starts with things like digitizing, image pre-processing. But then, of course, you also want to make sure, okay, well, what is this document we're looking at? What kind of content is this? So that's, again, very much focused on document and content classification. So is this a complaint letter, or is this a letter informing us that a customer has moved? Is this a, let's say, an application form, or is it a insurance claim? So that's classification. And if you then think about how we then want to extract the, well, what we like to call validated business data from these documents or from this unstructured content, that's where we talk about extraction. And funny enough, within the whole extraction capabilities within our document and content AI, there is, well, a lot of patented technology there. On the one hand, it can be very straightforward. Okay, where is specific data? Is it key value pairs? Those sort of things. But it goes beyond that. It is very much based on machine learning on its own. So there is a lot of AI extraction there happening. And from an AI perspective, it can be machine learning. It can be automated machine learning. It can be neural networks. It's natural language processing. It's all of that. And then combined, that is then, of course, the result that, well, organizations typically look for. I'm calling it business insights here as well, but you might also hear me mention validated business data, I should say. Apologies for that. Because why are organizations processing documents and content? Because they are looking for specific points of usable data. And by usable data, they want data that further workflows, rules, processes, you name it. Data that those capabilities can trust. So it needs to be validated, whether that's automatically done, whether that's with support from a human in the loop, whether indeed it's validated based on AI. That doesn't matter. But this is, again, a very quick introduction also to document and content AI. If you want to learn more about this, this might not be the video for you, but I've got more than enough videos on that as well. And if you've got any questions about that, please do not hesitate to reach out either to your local Tungsten Automation representative, or if you don't know who that is, drop me a line. Always willing to help. Off to the next flavor of AI, generative AI, which is, of course, a very, well, you might not even call it new anymore, because it's really taken a boom in the last, let's say, 18 to 24 months. And we as Tungsten Automation, we immediately, well, saw the value that this would bring in combination with the workflows and the intelligent automation that we want to offer to our users and our customers. And we specifically see two specific applications of generative AI in that specific example. On the one hand, it's focused on developer productivity. So where you are potentially a TotalAgility developer, and instead of just manually clicking and dragging and dropping your processes together, you can now, of course, with generative AI, just ask TotalAgility, well, please create an onboarding process for me, or create a return to manufacturing process for me. And powered by generative AI, TotalAgility is now able to then indeed create those processes just based on the natural language input that a developer, whether it's a citizen developer or professional developer, that doesn't really matter. But people who understand the processes and workflows, they can just interact with TotalAgility and it will build the process for them. And this doesn't stop with just natural language. You can even say, okay, well, we actually did a whiteboard session. We draw the process out, take a picture of it, give it to TotalAgility, and it's going to create the process for you. Oh, you've got an idea on the UI you want to offer to end users. Well, just tell TotalAgility and it will create that. Oh, I've got an idea for a business rule, or I want to create such and such based in TotalAgility. The Tungsten Copilot in TotalAgility will take a lot of the heavy lifting out of your hands and make sure that you can drive even more value going forward. A beautiful addition there is also that if you want to set up, for instance, document and content AI, you can also just ask TotalAgility to do that. So instead of just building these sometimes complex classification or extraction functionalities or capabilities, I might even say, you can now ask TotalAgility to do that. Again, all powered by generative AI. But we are not stopping there. We are also then using generative AI to provide more advanced business insights. So where you might want to be able to combine, for instance, multiple documents, cases, all of that together, and maybe even offer end users the ability to use natural language to literally interact with case data and really diving into, for instance, investigations or analysis that might need to be done based on content, documents, cases, you name it. So there's two flavors to that generative AI approach there too. And then we're actually going to talk about what we're all here for, decisioning AI. So the beauty is, of course, specifically in TotalAgility, that we have a lot of business data in our processes, in our cases, and these are typically the exact business data points that organizations use in order to make assessments. Are we going to provide this applicant with a loan or a mortgage? Are we indeed approving this request for a refund? Are we expecting that this specific customer or employee is going to keep improving, or are we expecting something else to happen? Are we seeing anomalies in one of our processes emerging, or do we see outliers? Those sort of things. And maybe the best example of that is a next best action approach. Allow me to say, okay, well, you might have your business process in TotalAgility, and typically you can use business rules to determine, okay, well, what should be the next step in this process. But sometimes the business data can't just be done in a, let's call it, declarative approach or a if-then-else approach, because the amount of data that we use to determine that is just way too much, and we need other capabilities. And this is exactly where decisioning AI really shines, because you can indeed do classification. Is this a fraudulent claim, or is this a customer that will actually churn, or is this indeed an application that will go through to the end, or do we see some sort of fallout happening throughout the process? Or are we expecting that this process will result into something that will provide growth going forward? And, well, essentially the decisioning AI abilities, well, they're limitless. Of course, there are some great examples, and I mentioned a few of them. But indeed, as mentioned, going forward in this initial video series, I'm going to do a classification exercise. And the scenario that I've chosen is indeed a process that's very near to me, and that is in financial services, in banking essentially, customer onboarding, where you might want to say, okay, well, is this an acceptable applicant? Can we accept or provide a loan or our services to an applicant, to a potential customer? This is, of course, something that happens millions and millions of times in every bank globally, whether it's part of a KYC, a Know Your Customer approach, or a CDD, customer due diligence, or DFC, detecting financial crime. These are processes that I've come to really understand working with a lot of banks globally. And I found a great example that we can use. And again, we're going to dive more into that in video number 2. So if we then look in essentially, how is this all then working together? I mentioned the abundance of data that TotalAgility typically has available to it. That can be data that's either coming, of course, from documents. It could come from internal systems. It can come from organizational data stores, data sources, databases, you name it. We can then, of course, also combine this with Tungsten RPA, which can then, of course, also leverage public data stores, whether it's commercial or open source intelligence, OSINT, you might even know that term. But all of these data points combined, of course, provide I would almost want to say like a 360 view of a process, of a case, whether it's an onboarding case or any of the other examples I already mentioned. We can then use those data points and use them for a next best action, for anomaly detection, for decisioning AI, essentially. And in the example that we're going to cover in these 3 videos, I'm going to be using the Microsoft Azure machine learning environment. Reason for deciding on Azure is, on the one hand, that's the flavor I know best, but we do see a very high, let's say, acceptance of Azure in financial services. And again, that's the example that we're using. So again, we're going to be using TotalAgility to combine that with decisioning AI models that you can develop on Azure. But of course, if you want to use a different cloud provider, hyperscaler, or if you want to combine your TotalAgility processes with maybe on-premise running machine learning models, maybe you already have a machine learning team or an AI team or a data science team even, who are providing models. The concepts, of course, are similar, but the approaches or more the technical details might differ. Again, we're going to touch upon all of them, but of course the examples are going to be based on Azure in this initial series of 3. So I want to wrap up, and I, of course, hope to see everyone in video number 2. But please make sure that if you remember 3 main things from this video, it's these 3 points. Tungsten automation, and in this example specifically, Tungsten TotalAgility, is indeed acting as that connective tissue. It has so much access to data as part of the processes that we digitally transform. So on the one hand, Decisioning AI benefits from TotalAgility, and at the same time, TotalAgility benefits from Decisioning AI, as it's able to, do things like next best actions, take automated decisions based on the outcomes of Decisioning AI, and it will then drive even more value, and it'll have a bigger impact in organizational automation initiatives, or maybe even corporate goals. And then, of course, indeed, as I mentioned, and this is, of course, all powered by that business data. Couple of the example industries, of course, financial services immediately comes to mind. You can also think about government, where you might see, well, intelligence, law enforcement, but also things like just local, national governments who are processing a lot of cases from a citizen service perspective, but also in retail. You'll see this in manufacturing. You'll see this in healthcare. Essentially, everywhere where organizations are driving transformation, you'll see potential applications for decisioning AI. Of course, in this series, I'm going to be focusing on banking and more specifically CDD, AML, KYC, or any other three-letter acronym. Well, that's it for this first video. Hope to see you soon for number 2. As always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly, or as I mentioned, to your local Tungsten Automation representative. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy. See you soon.